What is up, Chiefs Kingdom? Welcome back to RGR Football. This is Gary McKenzie, host of GridIron Lines. And in this episode of GridIron Lines, we're going to continue our series where we're talking about Coach Reid's grades for regular season matchups. And we'll cover week 4 versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers coming up next. That intro, ladies and gentlemen, is what the kids would call slaps. That intro slaps. I mean, it's awesome. Ryan did such a good job putting it together. Um, Now we'll jump into the same clip we do every week where I do the fan shout out. So this week's fan shout out goes to the Royal Flush, and they said the following: I had no idea people were still using Razor flip phones, but here you are using the 4 megapixel camera to film YouTube videos. So the Royal Flush threw a little shade at me because my video quality was pretty poor, but little did they know I actually used the Game Boy camera to film my video last week. And for what it's worth, I thought it held up really nicely. Jokes aside, though, I've been having some issues with the internet. I live in a very small town, and they haven't put in fiber out here yet. As soon as they do, which I've heard they're working on it, I'll get that hooked up, and we'll have better video quality. Now, jumping into our structure for how we're grading Andy Reid for his Week 4 matchup versus the Buccaneers. There's 4 criteria or 4 categories. The first is team preparedness. The second is key decisions. Third is play calling. And the fourth is outcome. Jumping into team preparedness. The Chiefs had 4 penalties for 32 yards during the game, and none of them made a major impact as far as the outcome of the game went. 4 penalties in an NFL game is not too bad. I think the Chiefs have had 3 penalties in a couple other games, so it wasn't their best, least penalized game. But 4 penalties is pretty good. It was a total of 32 yards, didn't play a major impact. So good on the Chiefs for being prepared going into the game to play a nice, clean, tight game. Next, I want to talk about Sky Moore. So in week 3, Sky Moore muffed a punt and it caused a turnover that had a big impact on how the game went. It wasn't that muff punt wasn't the biggest reason for the Chiefs losing versus the Colts. It was a multitude of problems, and Sky Moore's fumble or mishandling of the punt was just one part of that terrible pie that the Chiefs cooked uh, versus the Colts. So I did notice throughout the game versus the Buccaneers, he was put back there to return the kicks again, to return the punts again, and he looked pretty good out there. He looked natural. He didn't look as out of place as he did during training camp, and he didn't look as out of place as he did in the Colts game. So maybe the Chiefs spent some extra time with him to practice catching punts. I'm still not 100% confident in him back there catching the punts just because of what I saw during training camp and the Colts game, but he did look to make improvement, and I'm rooting for him to continue to improve throughout the season because I do think he can be a dangerous punt returner. So he cleaned it up, handled the punts well, looked really good back there, fielding the punts in week 4 versus Tampa Bay. So good job for the uh, Chiefs coaching staff to get him ready for the game. The offensive line during the game dominated. They looked focused, and their blocks were timely, and they were well executed. So the Chiefs' offensive line was a well-oiled machine during this game, which was like a complete opposite of what they did versus the Colts. And because of the offensive line play, it allowed Pacheco and Clyde Edwards-Helaire to have a monster game on the ground. And I would like to take a moment just to talk about how awesome both Pacheco and Edwards-Helaire looked while running the ball. Each time they were given an opportunity to run the ball, they ran it like their house was on fire, or they ran it like it was the last time they were ever going to be able to run again in the NFL. And so they played with a lot of passion, a lot of intensity. I couldn't count the number of times where Edwards-Helaire or Pacheco were pushing a pile forward while the Bucs were trying to stop them, and then along come the Chiefs' offensive linemen to shove the massive people even further. I love those plays, and I love the amount of effort that the Chiefs' offensive line and running backs put forward during the game. I think they were given some fuel prior to the game, and they took heart to it because the Buccaneers' defensive line was saying that they were going to control the game. They were going to dominate the game just like they did in the Super Bowl versus the Chiefs. That wasn't the case. The Chiefs' offensive line came out to play and had a huge impact in the game. Still talking about the running backs, Clyde Edwards-Helaire specifically, he did have a dropped pass on a fourth down play where he was wide open. Now, the pass was a little bit to his back shoulder, but he should have made a better adjustment to the ball, and that's 100% on him. He should have caught it, and that was a rough part in the game, but the Chiefs made up for it whenever they sacked Brady and got a fumble on the next play immediately following that. So, segueing into the defense, I thought the defense could have played a little better. I'm not sure if it was Spag's scheme that he had dialed up where he was playing off a little bit and not allowing Brady to throw the ball in those deep intermediate routes, but the defense looked a little more reactive than proactive and aggressive. And I think the Chiefs' defense is at its best, and Spagnuolo's defense at its best when they're attacking, when they're moving downhill, when they're getting behind the line of scrimmage. The Chiefs defense blitzed a lot and they weren't able to get to Brady. So the defense had an off game in this game versus the Buccaneers, and I had hoped they would play better because the Buccaneers did not have a good yards per play offense heading into that game. The Chiefs have done really well defensively in that regard. So the Chiefs were a little off defensively. As far as turnovers go and mistakes, there was a mistake from Mahomes on a pass play that was entirely unnecessary. He was trying to find Juju Smith-Schuster late in the game, and at that point in time, the Chiefs had a good control of where the game was heading, and he threw a pass that didn't need to be thrown, and it ended up getting intercepted and giving the Buccaneers a little bit of life, but they didn't have much left at that point in time. But it did put the Buccaneers in a position where they could make the game a little more interesting, but it was still pretty out of reach. Another thing that I thought the Chiefs did a good job preparing for was Matthew Wright. He did an excellent job kicking in that game. He came ready, he came prepared, made all of his extra points, made all of his field goals. I think if the Chiefs would have went with Matt Wright instead of Amendola versus the Colts, they ended up beating the Colts, but that's not the case and we can't change it. I also want to take one moment to note about how the leadership of the Chiefs, starting with Coach Reid and then Eric Bieniemy and then Patrick Mahomes, they all appeared to be in more unity. So my guess is that Coach Reid pulled those two aside, had a heart to heart with them. They talked about, you know, what to expect given certain circumstances in the game, and they were all on the same page. And that's a good thing to see. I think that'll pay dividends as the season goes on because you want those three people, those key parts of the Chiefs' offense, to be in lockstep and key with one another and making decisions as a unit instead of arguing or having disagreements. Because of that, I give the Chiefs a 16 out of 20, along with many other factors as far as their grade goes for team preparedness. Key decisions this week was a pretty easy one to grade. There were no challengeable plays that Reid could have thrown the challenge flag for. And then there's really only one key decision that occurred during the game. It was in the second quarter. The Chiefs had a 21-10 lead with about, I think, 3.5 minutes left in that quarter. And it was a 4th and 1 on Tampa Bay's 34-yard line. The Chiefs elected to go for it on 4th down. This play we already mentioned, where Clyde Edwards-Helaire dropped a pass that he should have caught. He should have made a better adjustment on, and he was wide open. So if you've watched these videos before, a good rule of thumb that I like to use for evaluating whether or not a key decision was a good decision or not is that if that same decision was made 1,000 times, would it work in the Chiefs' favor over half the time? And I absolutely believe going for it on 4th and 1 on Tampa Bay's 34-yard line would work for the Chiefs offense. They would have a positive outcome well over half the time. So I'm not dinging Andy Reid much at all for that decision because it was the right choice, and the Chiefs, in the majority of cases, will have success running that play. I'm also glad he did it because I want to see the Chiefs to be more aggressive on 4th down. So because that play failed, I did ding Reid one tiny little point, and they got a 29 out of 30 for the key decisions area of the grade. Next, I want to talk about the play calling. So the play calling in this game, I think this was a masterclass of play calling from Coach Reid. I think you could spend an entire, you know, week period just going over how much awesome display Andy Reid put on in terms of the play calling decisions that he made. It was a clinic. The Chiefs ran the ball for 4.7 yards per rush. which is an amazing stat given the fact that the Buccaneers defense is known for shutting down the run. And Coach Reid came in with the idea that we're going to run on these guys, and I think we can do it. And that's exactly what he did. So he took strength of the Buccaneers and turned it into a weakness. They ended up running the ball 33 times and dropped back to pass the ball 41 times, which was about a 45% run percentage. So they ran the ball 45% of the time in the game versus the Buccaneers, which, given Coach Reid's history, that's quite a bit of run plays. Usually he does a 60-40 pass to run split, but in this game he went run heavy, and it paid dividends. I also want to note that the player usage in this game was awesome. Sky Moore had 22 snaps. Fortson had 23 snaps. Noah Gray had 46 snaps. They're going heavy with multiple tight end sets, putting the running back in the backfield a lot. And that led to a lot of power football. It led to Sky Moore finally showing some flashes of who he can be. And I look to him getting more and more playing time as the season goes on. This is something we'd all been calling for. We want to see more Fortson. We want to see more Sky Moore. And so the Coach Reid did a good job using the players at his disposal in the right amount to find a lot of success offensively. And to add to that point, 8 different Chiefs players caught a pass during that game. One of the plays to Fortson was a slant that was for a touchdown, and it was a great job of using Fortson's size and strength against a corner who was playing off a little bit on a quick slant that, it was almost unstoppable with the way Fortson can use his body and use his frame to kind of shield off that defender. I also want to talk about how throughout the game, Coach Reid did a better job of sprinkling in the screen game. And he did that throughout the game. And eventually he set them up for an awesome classic Andy Reid play call where he had baited the defense over and over again throughout the game with the screen pass, screen pass, screen pass. And then what does he do? Oh, fake screen. And we're going to act like we're going to throw the screen pass. And here goes Marquez Valdez Scantling down the sideline wide open for an intermediate pass. It was an incredible play call. And Coach Reid had put that pressure on the Buccaneers defense all throughout the game to be looking for that screen pass, and all of a sudden he fakes them out. I also thought that the Noah Gray quarterback sneak on the goal line was a great play call. The quarterback sneak is highly effective, and Noah Gray is a large man. And so trying to stop him on a quarterback sneak is tricky. I also like how they had Mahomes in the shotgun, and then at the last second, Noah Gray steps in and takes the quarterback sneak. As a defensive lineman, you have to think, all right, we're geared up, or we don't know what Mahomes is going to do. He might pass it. It might be a pitch. It might be a handoff. Oh, crap, here comes Noah Gray. Oh shoot, they scored a touchdown already. Their reaction on that play has to be super fast to be able to stop it. And Noah Gray gets in there and snaps the ball in a hurry, and those defensive linemen are kind of left uh, without much of a chance because they're not prepared for it. I also thought that um, they played the short game very well to start the game to get the defense to start to creep up, and then they hit Marquez Valdez Scantling down the middle of the field for a deep pass. Overall, the Chiefs' offense averaged 5.6 yards per play, which, in terms of the Chiefs' offense, is a pretty pedestrian total. But you have to remember they were facing the number one defense in the NFL in Week 4 versus the Buccaneers. Up to that point in time, the Buccaneers only allowed 4.5 yards per play. So the Chiefs beat that by almost a yard per play throughout the course of the game. And then also to note, the Buccaneers were only giving up 9 points per game up to that point in time. And in this game, the Chiefs scored 41 points on them. That's unbelievable. And I cannot tip my cap to Coach Reid anymore for the play calls he dialed up. This was a masterclass of play calling versus a very good defense. And if this is the bag of tricks that Coach Reid is going to pull out throughout the season with this artillery of players that he has, then the rest of the NFL needs to be put on notice because this is going to be a dang hard offense to stop, especially with the way the offensive line was playing, the way the ball was getting distributed, the player usage. I cannot credit Reid more for the performance that he put forward on this game in terms of play calling. So, of course, I'm giving him a 30 out of 30 on the play calling grade, a perfect score. Lastly is the outcome. I really don't need to talk too much about this. This picture of Kelsey is awesome. Looks kind of like he's flying. But the Chiefs beat a good team led by Tom Brady, and it wasn't even close. They obliterated the Buccaneers, who I think will be a playoff team and could make some noise in the playoffs at the end of the year. So I give Coach Reid a 20 out of 20 in terms of the outcome for this game. All in all, Coach Reid got a 95 out of 100 in this game, which nodded him a nice A for the Week 4 matchup. As far as the entire season goes, due to a really poor game versus the Colts, Coach Reid is averaging a 73% during this football season. However, the Chiefs are 3-1. They're in first place in the AFC West, and they're in competition for the top seed in the playoffs. So, as far as the production goes for the Chiefs team in terms of winning and losing, they're in great shape. And Coach Reid hasn't even put forth his best uh, his best accumulation of games. So I think the future is bright for this season for the Chiefs. And with all of that, that is all I have to say about Coach Reid's performance during Week 4 versus the Buccaneers. I hope to see it continue because this was an awesome display of just who the Chiefs can be going forward with their current mixture of players on offense. I do think the defense has room to improve. They'll get a few key players back like Willie Gay and Trent McDuffie, Mike Dana. Those guys will all help out. And I think that the sky really is the limit for this team. And I don't want to temper anyone's expectations because I think that if the Chiefs play like they did for the rest of the year, they're going to be almost impossible to beat. I think they'd be a lock for the Super Bowl. But we have a lot more games to play, and we'll see how they fare for the rest of the season. With that said, that's the end of our video. Remember, if you like what you see here, make sure that you like and subscribe to RGR Football. We're trying to reach, I think, 30,000, 35,000, 40,000 subscribers. When you like, it helps the algorithms share this with other people who may be interested in seeing Chiefs content on YouTube. And also make sure that you comment. Do you think Coach Reid should have got a 95? Do you think he should have got a 100? How do you think he did? Were there any key moments in the game where you were just really impressed with what Coach Reid did? I'm curious to hear what you say. Maybe next week I'll pull your comment for the fan shout out. But with that, that's all I really have to say. So thank you for watching. This is Gary signing out.
Thanks for watching this video from the team at RGR Football. Click these videos to see more and subscribe to RGR Football.